now over 50 pounds. Absolutely incredible. I don't think anybody else in the country has done that. He's been around the track more times than most, knows what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And he's going to tell you now. So without further ado, here he is himself, Dave Lane.
On? Yeah? Hear me? Hear me at the back? Right, afternoon. All having a good show? You're supposed to say yes. Hey, that's it! That's the one! And it's behind me, is it? Oh yeah. Right, okay, I'm going to do a brief talk on my last couple of years on the shallow lagoon at St Ives, where all the St Ives crew are down here. And if you want to buy a ticket at the end of it, if I inspire you, you can buy a ticket over there somewhere. And that's my 10%. And you're not without vaping, yeah? Right, St Ives, shallow lagoon in Cambridgeshire. It's a complex of lakes that I fished about 15 odd years ago, all apart from one lake, which was the shallow, which at the time didn't really have any carp in it of note. I did put a couple in there myself, a 19 and a 20 pounder, and in the last few years the few carp that are in there have sort of grown and grown in size. And the biggest one, a fish called Colin, was just sort of knocking around the 50-pound barrier. So it came very much back up on the scene, like sort of under my radar. So I got myself a ticket and shot off back down there. And it was a bit weird to start with. It was a bit like going back in time, because I'd spent a lot of time on this complex. And it was just nice to sort of be back there. St Ives has got a very, very lively social scene. Nowadays in carp fishing, a lot of lakes are taken far too seriously. I mean, at the end of the day, carp fishing is to me, and should be to everyone really, it should be your pastime. It's a sport. It's what you do on your time off. You know, you work all week, you go fishing, you chill out, and there's nothing wrong with having a laugh. There's nothing wrong with having a few beers and having a barbecue and having a giggle, making a bit of noise. It is supposed to be fun, and I like to try and keep the fun in carp fishing, and luckily I found a few kindred spirits when I went to St Ives, because everybody I met there was of exactly the same persuasion. We had a lot of barbecues, we had a lot of beer, and we had a lot of fun. But also, there's the fish. I mean, that's the main reason you go. This was my first fish, it was actually my first session. Everybody was fishing. There's a shallow end, and in the spring all the fish get down this shallow end, and everyone was sort of crammed down there, and there wasn't any room for me, so I did what I normally do in that situation. I just went and fished out in the middle of the lake. You know, if in doubt, cast right in the middle of the lake, and I had two fish on my first session, a 29 and a 30 or 31. Which was a great way to start. It's nice to get them first couple of fish under your belt, gives you the confidence sort of to carry on, makes you realise what you're doing is right. But for me, more than anything, it makes me realise that they're just carp. You know, you go to a new water, it's very easy to get sort of put off, a bit nervous about it. You know, no matter how long you've been doing it, you think, am I going to succeed or am I going to fail at this venue? Am I going to get my head round it? But as soon as you catch a couple of fish, you just think, yeah, they're carp, like anywhere else, they're catchable. This fella is a fish called Big Head. Unfortunately, it's no longer with us. It died at the end, on my second year on there. But this was the second biggest fish in the lake, or it was, an absolute beast of a fish. The circumstances for catching this was, I don't think I've ever had a take like it. I'll try and describe what happened. If you imagine one end of the lake, it gets very shallow, and then the first swim you come to, about 80 to 100 yards in front of you is a gap, and that goes through some reeds into some out of bounds, and there's a big set of reeds all around the edge of the gap, and in front of the reeds it's probably, I don't know, about knee deep. You can actually wade around there and place your bait. But this particular day I was on my way home, and I pulled in there, it's hot, and I thought I'd just shin up the tree and have a look, and I saw two fish. I see one common, sort of, I don't know, mid-20 I suppose, and I see this bigger mirror, and they were just skirting around these reeds, just happy as you like, up and down, and I had about 2 hours to pick up the kids, and it's about an hour from home. So I thought, I've got a spare hour, so I just put on single bait, yellow bait, whacked it right across, about 80, 85 yards, right against the reeds. And the swim is about 8 foot off the water level, so your rods are really high. I'm using braid, so the tip's high, and it's going, hardly any of it's in the water, and it's going out there into this much water. Anyway, we've been down to about 10 minutes, I've had one beat, turn round, the butt of the rod's up here, I just managed to catch it before it went in the lake. Hooked into this fish, got him in, he was the common at 25 pound. And I thought, well, I've now got about 15 minutes left. I thought, it's got to be worth another chuck. So chucked it out there, put it in, screwed the clutch down as tight as I could so I couldn't take any line. I've just turned around to put some stuff back in the van and I've just heard the clutch go. How it managed to get any line off, I don't know. The rod was vertical and it was just zzz. So I grabbed the rod, and as I grabbed it, I kid you not, I lifted the rod up and it actually pulled me forward about 6 steps towards the edge, and it was right on the edge of the reeds, just thrashing its tail was out the water, and I had to turn like that and put the rod over my shoulder and just march away, and I could hear it behind, smashing the reeds to pieces. It was just going ballistic, but I couldn't let it get in there. And then I felt the rod kick, and I look around and I see the line come away from the reeds, and he was out in open water. And I played him in, and I mean, when he was in the edge, I thought it was a big one, to be honest. I thought it was Colin, but I got him in, and I'll tell you how much he weighed, if I can remember. It might have been 46 pounds. Yeah, about 46 pounds. Second biggest fish, absolute corker. There he is going back. Yeah, it's a shame he passed on because he was, I mean, all the fish in there are lovely. All the fish in that bit of the valley, they're real old, scaly, proper warriors. And even the ones they've put in, the stockies, they sort of match the original stock. You know, they're all sort of hand-picked, and they're not all the same. Every fish is different, which to me means a lot. As the year goes on there, every year, it's a bit of a pattern to it. If you, up in that top left-hand corner, that tree that's coming out in the middle there, out the water, that's the end of an island. Round the back of the island, down onto the shallows, seems to be the spring area. And then as the weed comes up, they come up this end, which is the deeper area. And this swim became an absolute firm favourite of mine. It's called the end of island swim, because it's the end of the islands in it. And the fish will come along and come round the back of that tree out here. It's about 60 yards to the end of that island. I caught a lot of fish from here that first year, once I got installed in there, and realised what a good swim it was. But unfortunately it does, you know, you can't catch fish from one spot and not draw a little bit of attention. It did become quite popular with everyone else. But it's a small lake, you know, you don't own the swim just because you catch a couple of fish, don't mean it's yours. You know, you have to share, but you do all you can to sort of worm your way in before anyone else. I didn't mean to do that. This is one of them stockies I was saying about. Hold on 1 second. This is a fish called SpongeBob, square pants, because he's square. Ain't got no pants, but he's square. That's a bit, it's a corker of fish, another one that fought like crazy. This was from behind the island one morning as they were working their way down. Yeah, this is the sort of scale of the stockies that are in there. I mean, they're fantastic looking fish, and when they put on a bit of weight, I mean, you know, you don't get many like that. It was an absolute corker. I can't remember how big, mid-double, I think, high double. Probably got a bit bigger by now. And the barbecues. Most evenings were spent with barbecues. Everybody at the lake, like I say, gets on really well. This guy, particular guy here, Tetley, he was sort of the main chef and barbecue king of the lake before I turned up. And then we sort of teamed up with 2 chefs on the lake. We used to have massive parties all the time. But because there's sort of 4 or 5 lakes around, you've only got to send a text out and say, oh, such and such is caught, such and such, and we're having a party. And everyone would turn up. They want to bring food and beer. And it's just, like I say, it's nice to have that sort of social scene going on. And quite often it was in my swim, and as often as possible, this was my swim whenever I could get it. Another thing about the shallow lagoon is the weed. It does get incredibly weedy. I mean, I'm sure on certain days, come August, with a bloody good run up, you could probably make the other bank without getting wet. It gets so bad. I mean, this first year we had to have the use of a boat to land fish a lot of the time. As you can see, it is like a lawn. And this gives the fish the confidence to move in closer in that deeper water. Gets them out of the shallows, gets them out of the out of bounds area, and gets them where you can actually fish for them. But it's just all about finding your little spots on the bottom, and once you get a spot and you get it going and you start catching fish on a regular basis from it, then it all becomes a lot easier. A lot of raking was involved that year, hell of a lot of raking, and a lot of boat work to get rid of the weed. Once you've got it all floating, I used to boat out with a rope and put it around a huge, like an acre of weed, and drag it all in and rake it all up, put it all up the bank. You used to have to check through it as well. You used to get a lot of little baby tench, it's a very rich lake. You get a lot of little tiny fish all flapping about in the weeds. You had to check that you weren't leaving any stranded on the bank. But once I got the spots going and once I got the bait going in, I was getting down there regular, usually getting there first thing on a Monday morning. There was another guy fishing the swim at the weekend, and he'd slide off about Sunday evening and leave it empty. I'd get there Monday morning. First thing I'd do, bump down the track and you look across, and you know, you're always like really nervous if you know what swim you want to get in. I mean, it's a bad way to fish, but sometimes you just know where you have to be, especially if you baited it up before you go home. And I'd get down, I'd look across and see that it was empty, and I was like, oh, I couldn't wait. I'd run around there, me and the dog with a bucket, just to bag the swim, and I was, like I say, catching on a very regular basis out of there, and having lots of barbecues. This is Tetley again. This is a fish that he caught out of that swim one day when he managed to get in, and like I say, it started to get a little bit popular, and Tetley was getting in there before me a lot of weeks. He gets down on a Sunday evening, but after chatting to him and working out his shift pattern, I figured out that if I got down there at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, he didn't get there till 6 o'clock on a Sunday, so I had a word with her indoors and said I might have to change my shift a little bit, and started doing the extra night. So I was getting down there on a Sunday and sort of getting in there quite regular. But the problem is, there's always other anglers. I can't say too much because he's here. Where is he? There he is. The dodgy chippy. Now, Dave Little, little boy named Little by Nature, he wasn't actually fishing on the shallow lagoon, he was fishing one of the other lakes over the back, but he decided for some reason he was going to have a week's holiday, and rather than fish his own lake, he thought, oh, Laney's catching a load out of that swim on the end of the island, I think I'll go around there and camp up for 7 days and nights and see what I can catch off the back of all his hard work. Is that how it goes, Dave? Something like that? Yeah, he's got his thumb up. Anyway, I had to fish on the other side of the lake, which is here, and he came round and ate all my barbecue and drank all my beer while being camped up in my swim. Not that I'm bitter or anything. And we had one of them conversations, you know like you have the chat, if I won the lottery, I'd buy a boat. You know, if I won the lottery, I'd buy an island. If I won the lottery, you know, I'd buy a supermodel. Well, we had one of them, if I catch Colin. And I said, well, if I catch Colin, you know, I'll go down the shops and I'll buy a great big crate of Guinness and I'll get a load of steaks and I'll have a big barbecue. And somebody else said, oh, if I catch Colin, I'll take you up the pub and I'll take you all up the Indian. And then Dave Little pipes up, he says, well, if I catch Colin, he says, I'm going to strip off naked and run around the lake. Sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for, you know. He's hiding for some reason. I don't know what time, 4 o'clock or whatever, first light the next morning, shout goes up, Colin. Strangely enough, I was the only one that remembered. He seems to have forgotten his little promise. See you later, Dave. They've got a worse one, yeah. The dogs also thought it was great fun, but fair play to him, he did. It was horrible. Luckily, on the return journey, he covered his modesty with a beer can. Very small beer can. And there it is, this Colin, this was everybody's obsession. It's a typical fish for that sort of area, a bit like the Fat Lady used to be, which was in the lake over the road. Big pit mirror, deep-bodied fish, carry a lot of weight at the right time of year. And obviously, to celebrate, we have to have another party. The guy on the right there, that's the governor, that's Gordy, who's somewhere around here, maybe. And the rest of them, all apart from Tat, all over there on the stand, ready to sell you your tickets. Also, very dog-friendly lake, which I like. I've never seen so many dogs on a lake, actually, to be honest. It was great. But one thing led to another, and led to some speckled hen, and led to the year going on, the waterproofs going on, the barbecues turning into chicken stews. I had another couple of fish sort of towards the latter end in the autumn, and the next thing you know, it's bonfire night, and the night that sort of year's slipping away from us. Obviously, this is November for those of you who don't know when bonfire night is. The lighting of this bonfire was hilarious as well. They drenched the whole lot in petrol and then tried to set it alight by firing rockets at it, which went very badly indeed. And then some brave soul had to sneak up there and flick a match at it. But when it got going, it was good. And sort of saw the year out really. It hasn't got much of a reputation as a winter lake. Never fished that good in the winter. I done a little bit, probably stayed a little bit too long to be honest. Eventually pulled off and came back the next spring. And this is the out of bounds area. This is up the shallow end, and this is where the fish, they'll overwinter in the deep water, and then as soon as the water warms up to whatever the right temperature is, they all shoot down into here. This is taken from up a tree on the out of bounds area, and it just gets black with fish, absolutely black with them. It's one of my favourite photos actually. It's a carp in a frame. I love this photo. But you can see up the tree, you can just watch them all day, every fish in the lake going round and round and round in this little bit. There's nowhere to fish for, or you wouldn't fish for them in this sort of situation anyway. The two nearest swims, you are literally waiting for them to come out. One's a 100-yard chuck and one's about a 10-yard chuck, but you know, you can see there's no fish there, and you can see them all in between, and you're just waiting for them to come out, which they do occasionally. This is probably the main swim on the lake. This fishes across to that gap I was just talking about. Fishes to the island which forms the gap. There's two swims here side by side. The first one where I had that big mirror that nearly pulled me in, and then this one which is an absolute swamp, as you can see. Or it was, it's a lot nicer now. And I decided that I was going to do what everybody else does this year, and I was going to put all my early efforts in April into this swim, try and catch Colin. It always comes from here, every year, early, comes from this area, guaranteed, April capture. But it was muddy and it was smelly and it wasn't the best. I fished it a couple of times, and then I managed to get a week off somehow. I can't remember how. I think the missus took the kids away, or something happened anyway, and I think it was 5 nights on the trot to fish, which is just unheard of for me. That's like a holiday. So I managed to get down there, did a bit of manoeuvring, and got into this swim, and the fish hadn't been out yet, and I think there'd been, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 fish out of the lake, and this is usually one of the first ones out. So I knew he was coming out, the air pressure was right, the time of year was right, the temperature was right. You know, this was the week that Colin was going to be caught, and I was going to be bloody well catching it, and I was going to stay there until I did. I found some lovely spots. I'm terrible, I can't stay still for 2 seconds. If I haven't caught in a few hours, I move. I was determined I was going to stay put in this swim. Used to sit out there every morning on the flooded old swim and just watch and watch. I'd seen a few fish, you know, they were using the area, coming round along from that island. I even pinged a couple out of there, some, you know, as they came round on the back there. Did a bit of work. Gordy came down with his chainsaw, chopped a couple of the old dead trees out of the way. He logged this one up. He got it. It was this high off the ground, and he logged it up with the chainsaw. And he was just about to sort of chainsaw the top, and it wouldn't give. It was just hanging there. I said, "No, don't bother with that." I said, "I'll do that for you." I walked along the top of the trunk, and you know when you sort of give it that before you jump? Well, I just give it that, and fucking snapped clean in half, and I went straight down with my hands behind my back and nose planted on the floor. I came up with claret coming out my nose and a scratch on my face. And the worst thing was, one of them came up to me and put his arm around me and said, "You all right? You all right?" Like I was about 100 years old. I did, and felt it. And then I found a sandpit over the back, made a barrow out of my unhooking mat, filled it up and yellowed the whole swim, put some sharp sand down, soaked up all the mud and made it a proper home from home. And we had a barbecue to celebrate, obviously. We had all that wood, we had to do something with it, there was tons of it. I decided also to spend one night here under the stars. It's the only night I've spent at St Ives under the stars, and the reason for that was Padua. Now anyone that's seen my blogs knows that Padua is incredibly well behaved, chilled out, proper hippie dog. But he's never had access to the open air all night before. I went to bed after the barbie, maybe a little bit worse for wear. I heard a bit of rustling in the middle of the night, thought nothing of it. Woke up in the morning. The reason he's looking at me like that there, he knows he's in trouble. I woke up in the morning and the dog is absolutely soaked from head to toe. He's covered in mud, brambles, branches, leaves, shit all in his fur. I'm like looking at him thinking, what the hell's gone on there? And then the angler from next door come along. He said, "Oh, I brought your dog back at about 2:30 this morning." I said, "What's he brought back?" He said he was having a whale of a time. He was charging up and down the path, chasing rabbits. He chased the geese in the lake. He'd gone swimming. He was rolling in the mud. He said he was having a whale of a time. I was like, bivvies from now on then. He was absolutely minging. Must have thought it was Christmas. And then the fish started coming. Plans started to come together. I had this one off the end of the island, which is about 125-yard chuck in about 2 foot of water. It fought like an absolute lunatic. And everything was really shaping up. I'd seen a couple of big fish and I'd heard a couple of real big fish in the middle of the night out there. So I sort of, you know, I knew the proper ones were out there. And it was just a case of waiting. I think I was down to my last night and I was really starting to think it wasn't going to happen. I stood out there, I'd seen a couple of big fish up against the island. There was only the one swim next to me, and that had been in rotation. It had a different angler nearly every night. Anyway, the guy had turned up the night before, this evening actually, gone in next door, said, "Where are you fishing? Is it alright if I book it?" Yeah, no problem. And his right hand rod was about 50 yards off my left hand rod. And he came round, had a barbie, a couple of beers. And then early the next morning, bang. He's had Colin from literally 50 yards off my left hand rod. And I just so knew it was coming out. I mean, that last photo, that one, that's those trees just over his shoulder. That's how close I was. I was stood there, I was fishing out there for 4 or 5 days, knowing this fish was coming out. And it did come out. It came out where I thought it was just 50 yards too far right. I think this was the 3rd time it had been out, or 4th time since I joined, and I'd been there and photographed it every time. So once again, I relocated when the weed came up and went down to my favourite end of island swim. Excuse me. And the weed had started coming up really savage this year. And because the fish had been caught, it got caught a couple of times, everybody stopped fishing there. It just got quieter and quieter and quieter. And I started to catch fish. So I thought, screw you, Laney, don't do what you done last year, don't shout about it, don't stick them on Facebook, you know, don't do your video blogs, or don't publish your video blogs, don't tell anyone, you know, there's no one here. I was getting texts, has anything been out yet, has anything been out yet? And I was just texting back, no. I thought, I won't say anything. see them, I did a series of vlogs. I did 4 vlogs. I called them the Secret Diaries because I was videoing them. And then I was just going home, editing them and leaving them and then doing the next one. It was over a 4-week period. And I just started catching fish after fish. And it all came about off the back of a trip. I did a social trip to Raysbury with my mate Paul Forward and Scott Maslin, you know, the EastEnders fella. And we were sat in the swim and the fish were bubbling like crazy and couldn't get a bite. And I said, this is just like Ives, you know, because that's what they were doing then. Bubbling everywhere, but no one could get a bite. And we'd gone down to fishing singles, which is what we'd done at Raysbury. And we sat down and chat about it. We said, what you probably need is to use a load of seeds, you know, something that's similar to the natural food. And I thought about this, so we tried it down there, and when I got back to St Ives, that's what I started with, pumping in loads of seeds, buckets and buckets and buckets of them. And sure enough, rather than bubbling all over the lake randomly, they started bubbling in the swim, on the spots. And in the end, there was only 3 lots of bubbling where my 3 rods were. And the weed was just disappearing. And I ended up with 3 little tiny, rock hard, perfectly clear spots. And the weed was like this all around it. And they were really tearing it to pieces. And I had a few barbecues to celebrate. But this is what the swim looked like, around and about. And it was only when you knew, you really had to know where the spots were. I had to be so accurate. This is the gear I was putting in. All different mixed seeds, party mix, tigers, sprinkling a few chopped hybrids over the top, like we all chopped up all random sizes, just to keep a bit of proper bait going in. And those buckets, they hold about, I don't know, let's say 20 kilos wet weight. I was putting 2 in when I got there, 2 in the next morning, 2 in the 3rd morning, and 2 in when I left. So that's what, 20, 40, 60, 80, a shitload of bait. Every week, loads of it, just piling it in, and like I say, the spots was getting bigger and bigger. And so were the fish. I had some amazing catches out of there. I mean, I had it so nailed down that if I was fishing, like the bite time was, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning was the prime time. If I hadn't had a bite on the right rod by 10 past 9, I knew it wasn't on the spot. I'd wind it in, and sure enough it'd be in shoddy weed where the fish had knocked it off the spot, and I'd put it back out there, 5 minutes later it was away. And that's not St Ives fishing, that's more like Farlows. But that's how confident I was. Each rod would go each day, and if one rod didn't go, I wanted to know why it hadn't gone, what I'd done wrong. And yeah, just, I mean, the mid-30s, a lot of these fish, basically just working my way through a catalogue of the lake. There was even fish that I'd seen in the water that I hadn't caught and I didn't even know the name of, and I'd get them on the mat and I'd think, oh yeah, that's the one I've been seeing up around the back of the snags. It got to a stage where I was actually videoing the takes. I'd set up the video camera, have it on the rods, and think, right, we've got about 3 minutes till that's away. And bang, away it goes, and I was getting them on film. This is a still from the video.
I can have a good fling with them centuries.
But still, I wasn't telling anybody. Catching these amazing, great big fish and just not saying a word. And I was getting like more and more texts. Nothing been out, anything been out. I say no, nothing. And I felt a little bit bad. There's all people that you socialise with and that. But I knew if I said, yeah, it's fishing its tits off, I've had 12 in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I knew when I turned up the next week, someone would be in there. So I thought, no, just keep going, keep going. Obviously, I was only after the one goal, which was Colin. Now my missus, she had a theory about Colin. I've driven her mad going on about Colin this, Colin that, Colin the other. And she said, what you got to do, she said, when you get down to the lake, you got to stand on the bank and you got to go, Colin, yeah, fishy, 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 fishy. I said, I ain't doing that. She said, well, if you don't do it, you won't catch it. Anyway, it plays on your mind a little bit, doesn't it? So the couple of weeks leading up, I'd go down there and I'd go, Colin, and I wouldn't catch it. Anyway, this time I thought, okay, go for it. So I give it the big Colin, make sure there was no one else on the lake. Giving it, fishy, fishy, fishy. And it worked. Next morning, the rod ripped off. Honestly, it tore off, this one. I mean, you wouldn't think a fish like this would fight harder than all those fish that came before it. But this one absolutely beasted me. Ripped off, I felt it go through one weed bed. I'm using braids so I can feel absolutely everything. It tore through one weed bed, ripped out the back, open water, bang into a second weed bed and went solid. And I'm moving into it and I thought this is something special. And I'm moving into it and I could see these massive patches of bubbles coming to the top, and I just kept walking back and walking back and walking back. And eventually that weed bed, you could feel it give and give. And a massive load of bubbles come up and the weed hit the surface and I got him moving. Luckily blinded himself with the weed, he couldn't see. So I managed to put it back into the second, the closer weed bed. Uproot that and get him right in. I got him as far away as that camera, and then the whole weed bed started plodding about like a great big octopus, you know, the tentacles coming up, and then it was plodding off. Must have weighed about 300 pounds. And then it was a big kick, and a lot of the weed broke off, and there's a bit of fish, and he's got this really distinctive sort of orange colour. And as I managed to drag the whole lot in the net, I had to get in and sort of scoop the net under it. I just see one little flash of that colour. That sort of, he's got these very pale gills around here. It's got this sort of strange hue to it, almost like I say, an orangey colour. And I saw that, and I thought, oh, I reckon I know who that is. That's Colin. I mean, he is a proper beast. I mean, he was at a full fighting weight there. I want to say 54 pounds. I'm checking with the guys. 54? 52? 52, someone's saying. We're not sure. It was 50 huge. That's what it was. Yeah, and I mean, what a finish as well for the Secret Diaries. I've done a series of 4 diaries, and in retrospect, if I hadn't caught Colin, they would have been shit, really. There'd been a load of fish in them, but they wouldn't have had the same impact as what it did, you know? And when I released them, they were really, really well received, and I was well chuffed with it the whole way it had gone. It was scripted. I mean, it had been scripted a few times before, and it just hadn't happened to me. It always happened to the bloke next door. But this was my moment in the sun, and I was going to make the most of it. And obviously, when you catch a fish of that sort of magnitude at a place like St Ives, there really only is one course of action left, and that's to have an even bigger barbecue than you've had all year. So I invited absolutely everyone who had a ticket. We had a monster barbecue. For some reason I had a ceremonial burning of my lucky carp fishing shorts. I've no idea why I did that, because I really like them shorts. It might have been something to do with the old speckled hen. And the place to have a barbecue is the opposite side of the bank to where I'd been fishing. So I literally just chucked out a bit of particle, threw a couple of rods out. So I thought, I'm doing all the cooking, I'm doing all the stuff. You know, I've got no chance of catching a fish. I don't want to catch anything else, but I just wanted the rods out while, you know, just to justify the fact that I was sitting there, really, to be honest. We had a lovely old time. It went on far, far too late into the night. As soon as I went to bed, stored away, 3 o'clock in the morning, I caught 2, one after another. So I thought the only thing I could really do would be to have that photo. There's not a lot of cans of anything left in them there. So sort of after the Lord Mayor's show, couldn't wake anybody up to take the photo, so I took it myself, packed up my stuff, cleared up all the mess, and drove away one very happy angler. And I can only say that, you know, in 2 years, two of the best years fishing I've had. It's an absolutely fantastic venue, and everyone is so friendly. I loved it there. It was like going back in time. So there you go. Thank you for